All right, Soma, thanks for coming on Channel 9 again.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So who are you again? What do you do?
My name is Somasegar. People call me Soma, and I run the developer division here at Microsoft.
Oh, so it's a little job, you know, few people, no big products. So I hear something's coming out. What's going on? What's this Orcas thing? Tell us about it.
So Orcas Beta 1
Okay.
is shipping today.
Excellent.
Okay? That's the good news. We've been at work on this for the last year and a half, and I can tell you that some teams, particularly some of the long lead technologies that we are shipping in Orcas, people have been working on a little bit longer, but it's great to see the product come together, and we feel like we've made enough progress, enough features, and the scenarios are starting to come together that we wanted to sort of take stock of what we have and be able to put it out to customers and start getting feedback.
Excellent. Now, it's beta 1, but just let's set the record straight. It's going to install on Vista.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Excellent, man.
Yeah.
So that's good. Great news. So what are some of the, I remember last time we talked, you mentioned something about the pillars.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about that, like what you actually delivered on in terms
Right.
of your vision.
Okay. So there are sort of three main pillars or three sort of core value propositions that we want to deliver with Orcas. And if you take a look at Orcas Beta 1, you'll be able to see how well we are delivering against those three sort of value propositions. And let me quickly walk you through those three. The first one is we want Orcas to be the best tool set for the latest and greatest platforms. That includes Windows Vista, that includes Longhorn Server, that includes Office 2000. And if you're the developer who is thinking about building applications for the web, we have fantastic Ajax support built into Visual Studio.
Nice.
So no matter whether you're building an application for the web or the latest client platforms including Windows Vista or Office 2007, or building it for the latest server which is Longhorn Server, we got some great tool support for you with Orcas. So that's what I would call as the first sort of core value proposition. The second value proposition is developer productivity. If you look back at sort of the history of Visual Studio and what we've done in this division, we always talk about developer productivity, right? And on every release after release, and we've done a fantastic job. So I actually feel good about that.
Okay.
With Orcas, we are again, moving the bar considerably on developer productivity.
Okay.
So let me give you a couple examples, right? One thing, I hope that it's not a surprise to anybody, is we are going to ship link support in Orcas. And we've talked enough about link over the years that I'm probably not going to spend more time drilling into this now. I think you took a video with or Channel 9 session with the C# team recently.
Yep.
So people who are interested on the details should go look at that.
Absolutely.
But link is going to be a great productivity enhancing tool for the developer, particularly if they are interested in building data enabled applications, which pretty much everybody does today.
Sure.
Okay. But there is another feature that I wanted to call out here specifically, which is multi-targeting. So if you think about in the past, whenever we ship a version of Visual Studio, we say that hey, you can use this version of Visual Studio to target a particular version of the .NET framework. And for a variety of reasons, people want to write applications that target multiple versions of the framework. And in the past, you as the developer had to go through the pain and say, hey, I need to have multiple versions of Visual Studio because one version of Visual Studio can only target one version of the .NET framework. So we sort of added support for multi-targeting for the first time in Visual Studio, where you can take Visual Studio Orcas, be able to write an application that can target either .NET Framework 2.0 or 3.0 or 3.5. And .NET Framework 3.5 is the one that we are shipping with Orcas.
Nice.
But if you want to target any of these frameworks, you can use Visual Studio and you can standardize on Visual Studio Orcas. So that we think is going to be a fantastic feature for developers.
Absolutely, because of course you'll get the debugging enhancements for across those frameworks. Right?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
Excellent.
So that's going to be great. So that's the second value proposition, developer productivity. And if I think about the third core value proposition for Orcas, let me take you back to Visual Studio 2005.
Okay.
That was our first entry in Visual Studio 2005 to build a set of tools targeted at teams or team development, where you have a bunch of people, including developers and testers and architects and all those kinds of people working together to build software. We said, hey, we want to get into the application lifecycle management tool space, and Visual Studio Team System was our first big step in that space. With Orcas, we are going to move that forward and take the next step in terms of enabling teams to be even more productive. And there are a couple of things that I want to call out in this context. One is, if you take a look at Team Foundation Server, which is sort of the backbone for how we want team collaboration to happen, where you have a central repository for all kinds of artifacts that a development team is interested in. We have done a bunch of work both from a performance perspective as well as scalability perspective to make sure that we can really scale it up to large development teams. Okay. Recently the teams ran some tests, and if you look at both the throughput as well as performance under heavy loads, we are doing phenomenally well compared to what we shipped in Visual Studio 2005. Okay. So we've done a lot of work. And I just want to take a tangential statement here.
Good.
In this division, developer division, we are self-hosted on Team Foundation server as we are building Orcas. And guess what? We switched over to self-hosting on the Orcas Team Foundation server.
Nice.
About a month and a half ago kind of thing. So we are sort of eating our dog food actively as we sort of make progress here. And the reason I call that out is because we want to make sure that our products stand high levels of load and stress that we ourselves put, because we are a fairly large development organization, and that sort of the proof is in the pudding, so to speak. And we want to make sure that that is there before we ship the product.
And let's talk about that. How is it done?
It's done very well.
As I
said before, if I look at throughput, if I look at stability, if I look at performance, we are doing almost an order of magnitude better than what we've done before.
Excellent.
Okay, things are looking great. The teams are feeling good. I haven't seen TFS server going down, which is going to cause a productivity hit for us. So things are looking good from that perspective. And I think, I would encourage people to go look at Brian Harry's blog. Brian Harry, does a fantastic job writing all these things about our experience in terms of self-hosting and what kinds of improvements we are making in TFS. So for people who are interested in details, I would say go take a look at Brian Harry's blog.
Outstanding. Very cool.
So that's sort of one thing that we are doing in the third value proposition. A couple of other things that I want to quickly call out. We did ship a set of tools targeted at the database professional a few months ago. We are taking that tool set and integrating it with the rest of Visual Studio Team System to make sure that seamlessly integrates with the whole application lifecycle space, along with the other tools in Visual Studio Team System. So that's one thing that we are doing in Orcas. And the third thing that we are doing in Orcas is making sure that we truly think about professional designers as the core part of software development or application lifecycle management kind of thing. And let me expand on that a little bit. If you look back at the 80s and the 90s and think about how people were building applications and thinking about user experience, people were excited about cool functionality, cool technology, and they would always think about user experience as an afterthought. Over the last few years, we've sort of seen that trend changing in a considerable way, where user experience is truly becoming a business differentiator. More and more people, when they are thinking about building applications or services, particularly that's consumer facing more than anything else, user experience becomes absolutely critical, and people think about user experience right from day one. And when we are living in that world, there is a strong need for designers and developers to work together collaboratively right from the get-go of any software project, right? So with Expression Studio that we are working on, which will hopefully ship later this quarter, and Visual Studio Orcas, we want to make sure that there is a good round tripping between the two products, so that it's easy for developers and designers to work on the same project file and be able to make progress hand in hand right from day one. So that's another big thing that we are enabling with Orcas and Expression Studio.
Now in Orcas you also have Cider, right?
Absolutely.
And we had Cider on Channel 9, I think about 6 months ago in the early stages, and that's a design surface for XAML.
Absolutely.
WPF, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So, but that's not really targeted at designers.
Yeah. So here is how I think about it, right? If you're a developer, building an application that is using WPF, or it's using WPF for its presentation, and you're a developer and you want to play around with XAML and figure out what the user experience should look like from a development perspective, Cider is absolutely the right technology for you, and Cider is part of Orcas. Now on the other hand, if you're a professional developer, you really don't want to think about code. All you want is do things in a completely visual way, and sort of have the designer bent off mind. You can use Expression Blend, and we want to make sure that the developer using Cider and the designer using Expression Blend can work together in a collaborative way, and that's what we are enabling between Expression Studio and Orcas.
Excellent. So the output from Expression can be taken into Visual Studio.
Absolutely, yeah.
Parsed and understood.
Right.
And the developer can then make it do things.
Right. The good news is both are like sort of work on XAML, so it's easy for us to make that collaboration work to seamlessly.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So what else is going on now? Of course, you're the vice president of the developer division, and I'm sure you're much more than just Visual Studio. I mean, you guys are the languages. You're our entire platform, really. I mean, it's a suite of tools, right? So of course, C++ is evolving as well.
Yep.
And I know you guys have done some good work with MFC and Vista, right?
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that we've done that we are adding support in Visual Studio Orcas is for the C++ developers to be easily take their existing application and move it to a Vista style look and feel. So if people want the arrow effects or other kinds of UI effects that is new in Vista platform, they have to do a recompile of their application and they get the benefits of lighting up on Vista automatically. So
Nice.
that's one sort of big step forward for the C++ developers.
Mm-hmm. Now let's also talk. One of the things that of course, with the new security model in Vista, in Visual Studio 2005, you had to run as administrator to debug. Has there been any work in Orcas to? I mean, I'm not exactly sure how you could debug not as an admin, but like, what's the experience in Orcas on Vista on the new security model? I mean,
The experience is going to be great.
Excellent.
But we've really taken the time to sort of understand deeply the Windows Vista security model and make sure that it doesn't serve as a hindrance for development, but more like providing a great security platform for people to go and build applications. There are two kinds of there are multiple levels of security we need to think about. We need to think about infrastructure security, we need to think about security at the operating system level, and we have to think about security at the application level. Now with Windows Vista, I think we've done a great job providing security at the base platform level, and Visual Studio Orcas, we made sure that it works well in the context as an application first, and it also enables to, as people start thinking about how to build more secure applications, Visual Studio Orcas provides a great foundation, a great tool for that.
Excellent. So this is a big release. Anybody getting any sleep around here? Let's see the emails.
I should tell you that I don't want to take this opportunity and say the teams have done a phenomenal job. Both the teams in the developer division as well as teams in other parts of the company that have contributed to Orcas. They've done a phenomenal job coming together and sort of it's fun when you see the product come together. 6 months ago, if you talked to me, I would have talked a lot about features and scenarios and functionality, and it's all like sort of what you draw on the whiteboard and not knowing how well it's going to come together. And when you start seeing the scenarios being enabled, those scenarios come together live, it's just great, and I want to thank the teams for doing a fantastic job on that.
Excellent. So let's talk a little bit about the evolution of Visual Studio. How do you go from Visual Studio 2005 to Orcas? In the sense that, I mean, clearly you're putting something out in the wild, you're getting feedback, and then of course you're innovating internally.
Right. Mm-hmm.
How do you balance like innovating and being able to ship, and then also coming up with really great ideas that you'd love to get out soon,
Right.
but it's just not going to happen?
Right. So there are a couple of things that I sort of think about. One is there is always three buckets of work, so to speak, that any product group has. The first is hey, I got a product in the market, I got customers using my product, I need to make sure that I make my current customers successful with the products in the market. You can call it servicing, you can call it like taking care of existing products and making sure that we deal with customer requests in a timely manner. So that's sort of one bucket. The second bucket is hey, I need to work on the next version of the product. So let me work on a set of features and scenarios that's going to be more relevant for customers to solve their problems today and what they're going to see in the near future, kind of thing. And then there is a third bucket of work which you can call incubation, or think about like long lead technology work that is going to take more than one release from conception to bringing into market. And at any point in time, any organization has to be doing all three. You can't say I'm going to do only one and not the other, kind of thing. There may be like one day in a year where I'm focused on one particular thing, but by and large we'll have to sort of make sure that we think about how we do all these three things and make sure that the organization is set up for success. So that's sort of one thing that I think about, right? We need to have some. I'll take Link for example, our favorite sort of feature in Orcas. We had Anders and a few other people starting to work on Link long before Visual Studio 2005 shipped. because we knew right from when we started thinking about Link to when we can bring it to market, it's going to take more time from the time that we had between Visual Studio 2005 and Orcas. So we got a team of people starting to think about it, right? So we need to enable the organization or the team to be doing that. The second thing is, I'm a big believer in transparency, right? I want to be able to engage with customers and talk to customers and share with them our thinking, knowing that hey, our thinking may change as time goes along, but it's more like in a collaborative way.
Sure.
That's why we came out with community technology previews. We started a process where we want to share our functional specifications with customers, with the community, and start getting feedback, right? Because the sooner we can engage with our customers and share with them our thinking and get feedback from them in the process, I think we are all set up for doing a better job on building the right product for our customers. So we sort of want to continue moving the dial in terms of how we want to engage with the community, how we want to sort of partner with the community, how we want to have a sort of open kimono style communication. But there's always it's a double-edged sword. When you engage with the community that early, you really can't commit to what feature is going to be there in which time frame kind of thing. So we need to be thoughtful about setting the right expectations of the community, and hopefully the community also understands that hey, this is part of working together and partnering together and collaborating. And from my perspective, that has worked phenomenally well. I can sort of list reams and reams of good things that have happened because we've gotten this deep engagement with the community right from the get-go of any project. And Orcas is no different. In fact, I feel good about Orcas because we've done even more in terms of engaging with the community earlier on. And that's something that I'm personally committed to sort of continuing that direction. And I think the division, by and large, is excited about that. And I think we are doing more from this division. And actually, I feel good because we are leading the way in terms of community outreach and community engagement for the rest of the company.
Outstanding. All right, and then you're on Channel 9 too, so even better. So hopefully people are going to download this stuff and play with it, and they'll provide feedback to you guys.
Absolutely, yeah. The one other thing I wanted to call out, which I think is new in Orcas, and I don't know how much we've talked about in the past or not, we used to have this product, our separate product called Visual Studio Tools for Office.
Yes.
One of the things that we've done with Orcas is saying that, hey, rather than making people go buy this separate product, why don't we make all of that functionality available in Visual Studio Pro? Because Office we see is becoming a important smart client platform. We see more and more developers wanting to build applications, maybe business applications or other kinds of customization on top of Office, and we want to make that functionality and that tool set available to a broader set of developers. So we decided to take all the functionality in VST or Visual Studio Tools for Office, including support for Office 2007, which is new, that is coming in Orcas, and we are taking that functionality and putting it into Visual Studio Pro. We think that's a good step. Hopefully, our sort of developers and customers would benefit from that and like that.
Absolutely. So that brings up actually an interesting question. In the past, there used to be Visual C++. Right?
Right.
You had their special IDE
Right.
and their special way that they're used to doing things. What are some of the challenges of creating this Uber IDE that's going to make different groups of developers equally productive in the context of what they do, right? You have a VB developer, then you have a C++ systems guy. Whether or not they're using Visual Studio, I don't know. Probably are. But give us some of the, that's challenging.
Yep.
I mean, you're creating this canvas for multiple types.
Right. Here is how I think about it, right? We used to think a while ago that, hey, a developer is a developer is a developer. You can be a C++ developer, a C# developer, a VB developer, a scripting developer. You may be building a client application, a server application, a servers, doesn't matter what you are, you're a developer, right? So I'm going to give you one tool and one size fits all is going to work absolutely great kind of thing. And we sort of got away from that notion maybe 3, 5, 7 years ago, 5, 6 years ago kind of thing, saying that, hey, that is not really true. At the end of the day, a developer is a developer, but there is a lot of difference in terms of the skill set that they have, the kinds of experiences they want to build, and the kinds of functionality that they care about more than anything else kind of thing. And we have this sort of rich and functionality Visual Studio family of products, and we want to make sure that we can provide a set of targeted experiences at different kinds of people, right? If you're a beginner programmer, I want you to want it to be easy for you to get started. Whereas on the other hand, if you're the most experienced programmer, it may be okay for you to understand a little bit more about the guts of the system of Visual Studio so that you can do what is right for you, right? So our goal is to provide a consistent experience, a consistent yet targeted experience is how I would call it. Because as you go from one stage to the other stage, both in terms of the skill set that you have as a developer and in terms of the kinds of applications that you're building, you don't want, radically different experience where, hey, everything that I did for the last 2 years, gosh, that's no longer useful because I'm going to do this for the next 2 years and I need to go relearn a whole bunch of new things. We didn't want that to happen. So we wanted to have a base family of products that provides a reasonably consistent, because at the end of the day, if you're writing code no matter who you are. If you're debugging no matter who you are. Yeah. If you want intelligent support, you want intelligent support no matter who you are, right? So there are some fundamental things that I think span across the whole, the breadth of the developer audience. But then we want to make sure that the experience is targeted at different groups of developers that make the most sense and makes them the most productive and effective at whatever they want to do. So that's sort of our reason why we have the Express products and the professional product and the team system product. And over time, we want to continue expanding our sort of, the focus on targeted experiences at different groups of people.
Outstanding. Now, you mentioned Express, so there's going to be Orcas Express.
Absolutely.
And that's
Absolutely.
Just continue.
Yeah, that's just a part. And hopefully, it's going to be even better for beginner programmers and people who want to sort of play around with things. And we want to continue down that path.
Excellent. Now, of course, this is just beta 1, but this is going to continue to evolve, right? It's not going to be Orcas, and then Orcas hangs around for 5 years, and then something else comes out. So you're thinking a little bit about what's coming beyond Orcas, even though you're building Orcas, and a lot of people don't really understand that sometimes development teams are building a product, but they're also thinking about the next one and actually have teams that are building parts of it. So what's going on that you can talk about in that area for the really curious?
Sure. One of the things that we've gotten the team spun off and starting to think about is the next set of what I call Visual Studio Team System tools post Orcas, which we've codenamed internally Rosario. Right? We've talked a little bit about that, but we are really in the early stages of Rosario. One of the things that we are trying really hard to do is make sure that the team is set up to be able to both deliver on Orcas in a timely manner with high quality, while still having some bandwidth and some resources to start doing some early development work on Rosario, right? And we are at a phase where we are sort of, talking to our closest customers, doing customer advisory councils and SDRs and the like, where we think, hey, these are the kinds of things we want to build, but we want to vet it out with our customers. Goes back to my earlier comment about engaging with customers early on in the process kind of thing. So we're going through that feedback collecting mechanism and making sure that we are focused on the right priorities, right scenarios, right features kind of thing. But at a high level, there are sort of 2 or 3 things that we are thinking about are things that we want to make significant improvements in the Rosario timeframe. One is in the testing tool space, right? We have a set of tools targeted at the tester today, and that's a good first step, but I think we can do a whole lot more, right? In some sense, I say, hey, for the last 20 years, we've been focused heavily on developers, and guess what? We want to show as much love to the testing community, and I think here is a great opportunity with Rosario that we want to take the next big step forward. There are lots of interesting challenges. You want to have test case management systems. You want to have use code coverage analysis information to be able to decide what kinds of regression testing you should do or not do, as opposed to brute force testing all the time, right? You want to do rich functionality testing. You want to do load testing. You want to do stress testing. You want to do unit testing. You want to do you want to have virtual lab management, because not every team can afford to have big brouhaha test labs, right? Sure. So there's a lot of interesting problems that we think we can go solve in the testing space, and we want to take invest in that space considerably and take a huge step forward in the Rosario timeframe. The other thing that we want to do is we consistently hear from customers that they would like to have a clearer line of sight between business goals and business requirements that they have, and knowing what exactly happens when a software project is done. Today it's ad hoc. You may sit in a restaurant and write in a napkin your requirements, or you may be using Word, or you may be using Excel. We don't know what, but people have different ways of writing it down, and then they give it to the development team, and it's sort of a black hole, because then the development team does what they do, and there isn't clear sort of correlation between what somebody thought we had to do initially to what actually got done, right? So instead, if I can figure out a way to take the requirements and be able to translate that into a set of work items that I store in my TFS database, and then assign it to my development community, and the developers, as they finish the particular requirement, they either say, yep, I did this, or no, I couldn't do this, or hey, I had to change this because this made better sense, and then flow that information to the tester to make sure that the tester can test against those requirements, so that when the project gets done, we actually know, hey, what did we do here and what did we not do, and as more and more people start thinking about compliance, it's important to have a log and a record of what actually we did related to the requirements, right? Mm-hmm. So the whole notion of being able to track and elicitate your requirements through the life cycle of a project, we hear that as a big request from our customers. So we want to invest in the space, and we want to go make some progress in the space. So that's going to be another big thing that we want to focus on the Rosario timeframe. The third thing is if you take a look at any IT organization, you got a project management office, you got a development organization, you got a IT ops organization, and today we have products that are targeted at each of these audiences. We've got project on the client and server. We got portfolio management product targeted at the project management office. We've got Visual Studio Team System and Team Foundation server targeted at the development organization. We've got System Center and all our management products target the IT ops people. Now, if we can figure out a way where these sets of tools and products can use a common language to talk to each other, so that there is a seamless flow of information and workflow that happens between these three audiences in any IT organization, we think we have an opportunity to go make the entire IT organization that much more productive, effective, and successful. Excellent. Now, for us to deliver on this vision is going to take several turns of the crank of our products, but we want to start making some concrete progress in the Rosario timeframe. So these are sort of some of the things that we are thinking about for Rosario, and over the next few months, as we sort of get feedback from our customers and decide what realistically we can get done in a reasonable time frame, we'll be able to talk more about the specifics of what Rosario is going to be all about.
Outstanding. And so back to where we are today with Beta 1, congratulations.
Thank you.
I know you guys have been really pushing hard to make this, and I'm super happy to hear that it's going to install on Vista. Also, one thing that you touched on briefly was that the whole Web 2.0 thing that's going on right now. JScript is again surfacing as a really important interpreted functional language. It's not functional, but you know what I mean. One of those script type languages.
Scripting language, yeah.
And you guys have actually built in IntelliSense for it in Orcas, which has always been missing. Thank you.
Yeah, we did add some tool support for JScript with IntelliSense and the like to make it easy for people who want to use JScript, particularly if you're building an Ajax style application, or if you're building on Silverlight, which we just announced earlier this week, because Silverlight does support JavaScript. So if you want to build applications that are more webby like applications, and you want to use our tool set, we got some better tooling support for JScript in Orcas.
Outstanding.
Yep.
Well, it's always a pleasure to talk to you, Soma.
Yeah, I do want to take this opportunity, like always, to say thank you to sort of the community and the customers, because your feedback has always been super valuable for us in terms of both making sure that we are building the right products and occasionally to keep us honest. So from that perspective, I do want to take this opportunity and say thank you.
Fantastic. Well, you take care.
Yeah, thank you.